This is the customer success best practices when beginning with Device42 auto discovery. I've got a short slide presentation, and then my plan is to go into some hands-on practices through the UI just to show you how we walk through some of these options that we're talking about. We do have moderators as well from the customer success team, John Ferrero, Tim Mickens, and Dan Holroyd. They're going to be helping answer any questions or things that come up as we go along the way. But we hopefully will have some time at the end. We will have some time at the end for some questions. All right. So how does Device42 work? I want to review the architecture in case you're not familiar with it. The Device42 platform is composed of four main elements. There's the main appliance, the remote collector, the Windows Discovery Service, and the Windows or the NIX installed agent. The main appliance has jobs that are configured to run on the schedule, which query the remote endpoints for their data. You can see in this diagram on the right-hand side, there's the main appliance. Then down below there are two illustrations of network segments. They're both identical. You can see there's the Device42 remote collector. There's also the Device42 Windows Discovery Service, and those are both querying the data of the local infrastructure. All of that information is passed from the remote collector via HTTPS port 443 to the main appliance. So it's all secure, and it's a single port that you have to enable on your firewall. So best practices with auto discovery. Getting started with discovery. The methods below are the ones that are most commonly used and the ones that we suggest that people use. To start off with, the TCP port scan is used to identify the Windows or the NIX devices on any given network. Creating one of these discovery jobs is one of the easiest ways to get started. Those jobs will in turn create hypervisor/NIX Windows scan jobs for those two types of operating systems. Again, Windows and the NIX, Linux, Unix, CentOS, Ubuntu, things like that. Ping sweep will identify all the used addresses for the specified subnet range. So for example, in my demo network at my home, I've got a 192.168.40.0/24 network. SNMP scan is used primarily for discovering network devices that have SNMP enabled. We support SNMP v1, v2, and v3. Nmap is used when devices on the network are unknown. If you want to find different devices, VoIP phones, card scan readers, printers, things that are connected, in my own home network, I can find my Fire Stick and things like that. It identifies all the ports that are listening on the network and the network ranges that are there. So continued with getting started, certificate scan. You can easily track when your SSL certificates are expiring. If you'd like to see an example of this, if you're not sure what servers are on your network that are running web servers that have SSL certificates, you could simply create a job and use the URL for your Device42 instance. That'll give you a great example of how that looks. There's also the Discovery Creation Wizard. It walks you through the least amount of fields required for a job, prompts you to choose a schedule and the network range, along with the device type. For the hypervisors, NIX, and Windows scans, you'll need one of the following installed for Windows Discovery: the Windows Discovery Service, which is preferred, or the remote agent, which would be installed on the Windows system itself. That's configured using Windows Task Scheduler to run the command, which will in turn send all of the data directly to the remote collector or the main appliance. When doing software discovery, each remote collector and Windows Discovery Server can handle about 1,000 to 1,200 devices. And again, when you're doing software discovery as part of your job. If you're doing just basic or network discovery, this amount can be doubled. You can get upwards of 2,000 to 2,500 devices per remote collector. That's what we recommend. There's also other factors that come into play: scheduling, how frequent you're running the jobs, and how many jobs that you have configured overall on the system. We recommend, again, to use the TCP port scan, which will auto-create discovery jobs. Again, the benefit is the port scan jobs will update the auto-created jobs automatically as devices come on the network. It will also update the jobs as devices come off the network as well. So in those port scan jobs, if you have systems that are being created and have then been discovered, day after day, the same is true if those systems come off the network. Those auto-created jobs will be updated and those systems will be removed if they're no longer found on the network. It's also best to schedule these jobs based on the rate of change in the business. For example, if there's many virtual hosts that are created or deleted, you most likely benefit from more frequent jobs to be able to see the different changes that happen over time. Network equipment doesn't typically change that often, so less frequent jobs are more likely. All right. So that's the end of the slides. Let me show you how some of these jobs are created in real time. I'm using my demo system just to give you an idea of what the UI looks like. I'm going to start off with the Nmap job because that takes a little longer to run. So I want to configure that one first. So I'll navigate to Nmap. You can see I don't have any jobs configured. I'll add an Nmap auto discovery job. We're going to give this a test name here of demo, name of demo Nmap, sorry. I'll start off with my network range, .1, give it an ending range, 192.168.40.254. I'll choose my remote collector to run this job. If I would like to use a name server for reverse DNS lookup, I can do that. But I want to detect the operating system, if there's any service and version information that I can collect. I want to gather all of that information in here. I can also set a discovery schedule on how often this Nmap job will run. So for example, if I click on the link to add another schedule, I'll get one particular schedule. I can have it for every day. I can choose now, so it'll run every day at 10:07 a.m. And I'll save this job. So tomorrow, well, probably tomorrow at 10:07, it'll run. But I'm going to run this job now. I want to let that run in the background so we can come look at the results later. Next, I'm going to move to the TCP port scan job. And you can see I have a few jobs already configured in here. I'm going to create a new demo test job. So I'm going to click on the Add TCP port scan option over here on the right-hand side. And we'll give this a name, webinar demo test. I'll choose my remote collector. On the server or servers, I can put in a single server, multiple IP addresses, or a range. So what I'd like to do here is specify a range. My network is a /24. I can exclude servers. For example, if I have in my enterprise, if I have an Active Directory server that I don't want scanned as part of this range, I can exclude that server by simply clicking this button, putting the IP address in there. So I'll exclude my router, for example. Whoops, if I could type the IP address correctly. When the auto-created jobs are created, this is the format it'll use. It'll use this variable of %name%, also %platform, so you'll know if it's Windows or Linux that it was done, and then auto-created. If I modify any of this, this will be transferred over to the subsequent jobs that are created. For the credentials, I can add in multiple sets of credentials. So for my Linux systems, I'm going to use root as my Linux root user. And on my Windows job, I actually use the service account on the Windows Discovery Service. However, if you had an additional Windows account, Windows Service account, you can select multiple accounts in here. So just as an example, I have this Azure client ID, but I'll remove that for purposes of this demo. And then there's different options in here. You can give the precedence to the host name. These options here are not checked. Ignore host serial number and host UUID. It's best to, you don't want these ignored because as part of our matching algorithm and merging the records together, we use the serial number and we use the UUID as data points to be able to recognize, from different discoveries. When we do a hypervisor discovery and we're collecting virtual systems, and then when we actually collect the system information, doing a deeper dive Windows discovery, we use this information to merge that record together. I'm going to all of these options here, I'm going to choose discover software, services, applications, depending on your licensing, will depend on the level of data that you'll get from these options. But all of these options will be brought forward to the auto-created job. The TCP port scan job does not actually discover the software or services or applications. It just, again, it brings these settings forward to the auto-created jobs. And you can choose a service level for the systems that are found. If it finds any VMs, you can choose a different customer. So different options. If you'd like to discover database information, you can check this box off, have those credentials in. And again, you can have a schedule when this port scan runs, just like we did in the Nmap job. I'll choose now on this. And that way there, every day this job will run. If you're licensed for resource utilization, you can check that option off here as well. That'll get that. So again, any questions that you have on any of these options here, if you look through the documentation, you should be able to find information on each and every one of these. So I'll save this job. And right now, you can see the job name, webinar demo test, and we'll run this job. And when I go into the job, I can then see that it's running. If I needed to see more details, I could click the job run report. We don't quite have anything yet because we're just at the beginning of the bar. So quickly, we can see 252 port checked failed. There's not many Windows or Linux systems on my network. You can see there's a little more data in here. So it found on Windows, it found 1 IP, and on Nix, it found 2. So we should end up with, there it is, 3 systems right there. Now, if I wanted to see what was found, I can click on this link. The number 3 opens a new window, and I can see the IP addresses that it found. I can see the objects that it created. So it created these systems here as part of these jobs. So let's go over to the Hypervisors, Nix, and Windows section under Discovery, and let's look at the jobs that were created. So you can see I have 2 jobs. I have Webinar Demo Test Nix and Webinar Demo Test Windows. Now, if I go into the Nix job, you can see I have 2 addresses here. You can see my password was brought over, right? But I haven't discovered anything. I don't have any results down here. So let's run this job now, and let's see the results that we get. And let me go back to my Hypervisors, Nix, and Windows. And on my Windows job, as I mentioned, I want to use the Windows Discovery Service on that. So I'll use the WDS. If you have application dependency mapping licensed, you can enable that. I'll set that for 30 minutes. Again, resource utilization, I could do that. So I'm going to save this, and we'll run this job as well. We'll come back to these, and we'll look at the results in a moment. I can see my task is running from this UI here. One of the other jobs we talked about was the ping sweep. So let me configure that and start that. And we'll go back to the, we're going to look at our Nmap job once we start this off. So I'll choose to add a ping sweep job. And this is a DHCP range. You can see I have a few options there. I can, whether it's static, reserved, or DHCP. And my network will be my home network. Whoops, I need to put a slash there. And we already talked about schedules, so I'm going to save this, and we'll let this run, and we'll come back and take a look at this and show you how you can see the results of this later. Let's look at our Nmap job. Hopefully I'm not bouncing around too fast and everyone can follow this. So it looks like this task is still running. Let's see what the status of it is. So it's about halfway done. So that's why I wanted to start it first. Let's check our other jobs. Data has been sent. We can look at our Windows job. We only have 1 system there. So this job ran, and it's been completed. It only took a minute to process, which is great. Looks like we still have, we're actually still gathering information here through the detailed and the advanced discovery, because it'll be collecting software information. Yep, you can see right there, that bar just shot up. So we'll wait a little bit for this one. One of the other jobs we talked about was the SNMP job. So let's look at configuring an SNMP job real quick, and we'll come back and check our results. So first I choose, just like the other jobs on the right-hand side, I choose to add an SNMP job. I choose my, choose my remote collector. I can choose my particular server or a range. So again, I'll choose my network range here. I can exclude servers. I can ignore operating systems. So if you have a Cisco device with an iOS operating system on it, you can specify that you want to ignore those operating systems or other SNMP operating systems that you're aware of. By default, we choose port 161. If you happen to have a non-default port for SNMP, you can modify it here. You choose the version v1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or 3. When you choose v3, you do get the additional fields here for the user, the authentication mode, if there's the SNMP context for that. But in my environment here, we're just going to do v2c. And I can choose a single or multiple community strings. So for my example, I'm going to choose public for this. And there's different options here under network device, blade, enclosure blade. You can add different options here, device to manage resources, add devices for all IPs on a load balancer if we find a load balancer, different items like that. And also discovered ports types to ignore. So if there's some things that you want to exclude, you can do that. And again, all of this information is in the documentation. If you were to search on SNMP discovery, you should be able to find anything that's relevant here in the documentation to make any changes. If you have the power monitoring, you'd want to expand to this power environmental options here and enable power monitoring for the PDU devices. So as we find the PDU devices on the network, we can make sure that we capture the power information for that. And again, we talked about schedules. I can add a schedule quickly, and I can click save. And that's how you create an SNMP job. So I will run this job now. I don't believe it'll be very successful because I don't have a lot of SNMP devices or any on my network. So let's see where we are in our Nmap scan. And we're getting there little by little. So let's go down back to our hypervisors, NICs, and Windows jobs. And let's look at our Windows job that we started before. I'm trying to be aware of time because I know I want some time for if there's any questions at the end. So you can see I've done my basic discovery. All 3 bars have passed. I can see a start and an end time. Detailed discovery, again, start and end time, took 2 minutes for that. So overall, and then advanced discovery, there really wasn't too much to gather there. So it ended at 217 after it got past the detailed. But you can see from start to end, from 214 to 217, it took 3 minutes to discover everything on this particular device. And if I would like to look at this device, I can click on the 1, I can see the score. I can see that I ranked really well out of everything. And here's the object. That's my laptop. And it picked out the name. It's a generic non-rackable. It's actually a laptop, so I could edit this record, change it to laptop. It got the hardware type, serial number, the UUID off of this system. Down below, I can see the CPU. I can see my operating system. I can see the CPU speed. If I'm counting this in licensing, all the different connectivity options that I have that are configured, IP addresses that are on the system. Is there an alias? So there's the short name, right? Then I have different tabs over here as well, if you're not familiar with these. So life cycle events that you can track if you're assigning this device to somebody, or if you're moving it from department to department. Under other, you can see it's got BIOS information. So this can be helpful if you want to make sure that your systems have the right firmware, the right BIOS information. These are custom fields that are defined against this device record here. So you can define as many custom fields as you like. shows me my discovery score down below, how it passed. Port check auth cumulative score was a 94, so there were probably a few options that I didn't check off, so I got a partial on that. What are the parts? If I have any parts assigned to this device, I could, could be a hard drive, power supply, things like that. Applications, we didn't detect any applications. We did detect a lot of software, Internet Explorer, Network Framework, .NET Framework, I should say, Lenovo Vantage. What are the services running? Different things, Adobe, what have you. I could look at all of the service for these. And then the mounts. So here's my physical hard drive. Here's the space that's available. And I got this from the resource utilization, captured this. So pretty sure I had that checked off in this job. I'd have to double check in the job, sorry. So that's my Windows system. If I wanted to go back and if I wanted to look at my Linux system, what did I capture there? I can go to my Nix job. And you can see it went down. It found, let's see, one of them had an auth failed and one errored out. So I chose the wrong authentication on that. So unfortunately, I can't show you any data there because I'm trying to be aware of time. And I think the last thing I wanted to show you is let's look at our ping sweep job that we started. Looks like that went. So across my own personal network here, we had 19 items that it was successful. It added 18 addresses. So it added those 18 because we discovered a few systems, the Windows and the Nix systems, but then there were other devices on the network that it added. So if I click on the 18, I can then see all of these different IP addresses. There's just a little bit of information with each one of these, whereas you get more information with the Nmap job. So still running. See if we have any data that we can look at, because that would be helpful. Nope, not yet. So, and again, that's why I started this one first. So I apologize. My suggestion would be to run this in your own environment, and then you can see the results that come through there. I do know that in my own network, I've found my Fire Sticks. I find smart TVs, phones. My iPhones are found on the network. Even my iRobot Roomba is found on my network, and it tells me what it is. It even shows the kernel of the operating system that's running on that. So, we've got about 6 minutes left. I would like to take some time for some questions. I can see that there's some questions in here. Let's see. So what is the advantage of using Windows Nix Discovery over Hypervisor Discovery if all your systems are virtualized? Great question. The Hypervisor Discovery captures the virtuals that are on that hypervisor. So I'll use VMware as an example. If I was to do a hypervisor scan of VMware, I will query that host and I'll be able to identify the guests that are on that host and the operating system, but that's about it. The deeper dive discovery, if I do actual Windows discovery, that's going to gather all the information. As you could see on my system, I could see the BIOS information. Well, granted, it's a physical system, but I could see the software that's installed. I can see the services that are running. I get much deeper information than just doing the virtual discovery, the hypervisor discovery. The hypervisor discovery is very helpful for, again, identifying your what's the subscription on that host, right, of resources, CPU, RAM, things like that. Is it oversubscribed or undersubscribed? How many virtuals are actually running on a particular host, right? So that was a good question by Joel. Iron Silver, I've used the import function to add a number of access points that do not currently have SNMP enabled. If we enable that in the future, how will auto discovery recognize these access points and update them rather than duplicate them? Very good question. If you have, I did a scenario for someone where I used the serial number of a device. I used my laptop, for example, and I added the device in manually with my serial number. I then auto-discovered the device, and it used the serial number as a merge object, and it created the one record. So I'm not sure the data that you've put in on your access points, if you do have the serial numbers for the access points and you're putting those in, that would certainly be a record. I think one scenario could be to do a discovery of a single access point, look at the information that's been discovered, and then make sure that that data has been manually imported in on the record. But that's a good question, Ian. Thank you. Let's see, question from Mike. We use SCCM integration, which uses .NET Discovery Tool. It has been labeled legacy. Are there, oh, the question scrolled up, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Tim, I just answered it.
Oh, okay. That's why the question went away. Thank you,
I
Tim.
apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Let's see. Let's see. Hello. Would like to see how the devices are configured in the VirtualBox and Hyper-V. I'm new to Device42. So my Linux systems that I didn't have authentication for is actually a VirtualBox system. And I did not do hypervisor discovery for VirtualBox. I could have done that. That's a good question, but it's very similar to other platforms, if not identical. I hope that answers. John's typing an answer on that one. Let's see. Ryan has a question. Dan is typing an answer for that. And then Mike has a question. Let's see. Make sure there are no plans to kill it off and not have a replacement. Yep. Very good, Mike. Thanks. And that must be from Tim's response. All right. So we've got other people asking questions. Let's see. I've got a few things in the chat. Let's see. So Tim actually brought up a couple points about how many jobs could be run at a time, what we recommend for the amount of IPs in discovery, and also like what could discovery exceptions be. So good points to bring up, Tim. Thank you. The I think relative to what I said earlier about your running the jobs, depending on the rate of change, it depends on what the size of the network is. So we recommend in the documentation not to go any larger than a /16 on your network. /24s are good. I've had some people put several /24s in a particular job, and they run them overnight, and people stagger them too. One of the things to look at is when you're running the job, how long does it take? So this particular Nmap job took 20 minutes to take. So if I was scheduling several of these, then I would want to try to pace them out, right? And they can run concurrently. But if you start seeing that jobs are taking hours to run, then you want to look at, what's the configuration? What's the configuration of the job? How many networks are in the job, right? And then you may want to spread those out. You may want to remove some of those networks from the job and create a second job. So I've had some people that have had to do that. But and then let's see, I talked about the recommended IPs, and then discovery exceptions. You can see exceptions when you look at this job run report. You may see a discovery exception, or you may see one over here. I've had where a port is available. I've actually had some instances where some ports are not available, and that has caused an exception. I wish I could generate one here so I could show you, but if you click on this link, it will bring you to the screen, the discovery score screen, and then you'll be able to see the different exceptions that are listed there. So you should be able to go through them. So let me see a couple more questions here. John is typing for best practices for DMZ. And then Ryan had another question. We're currently running Device42 on our on-prem estate. We're thinking long-term migrating this to Azure. What's the best method for this, and how time-consuming is it? We have, you can get the main appliance from the Azure Marketplace, and you could back up your database, your on-prem database, and then restore it to the Azure instance that you've deployed. That way, there you don't lose your data. That would probably be the best way to do that. And then, of course, if everything's going to be in Azure, then you could discover there locally, have a remote collector in Azure. You could also, if you still have a remote collector on-prem, if you still have on-prem devices, and this is for Ryan. I'll check this off and I'm answering this live. If you still have devices on-prem, you could just have a remote collector on-prem, and if it's trusted network up to the Azure cloud or across the DMZ, then that should work just fine. But so we are at time. We only scheduled this for 30 minutes, and we may, this is the first of a series, so we may consider extending these and having a little more time on these. But I appreciate everybody for joining. And I want to thank you all for your time. We will be sending out more of these in the future. We have another one scheduled for next month. The subject for next month is going to be tagging. We may go over some other best practices as part of that. But if you're interested in tagging and how that can be good for you and what you can do with it, then look for the invite, and we will see you next month. So everybody have a great day, and thank you very much.